Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. This episode is powered by Dr. Ray Gorman, founder of Engage Movement. Learn how to boost your income without relying on sessions. Get a free training on the blended practice model by following at Ray Gorman DPT on Instagram. Joining me today on the podcast is Ray Gorman. Ray is a past guest who I brought back because he's got so many amazing insights and experiences, and he himself is an incredible person, and I can't wait to continue my work with him. Ray and I are going to discuss a blended practice model, a virtual practice model, just an alternate career path for physical therapists who might be getting tired and maybe a little burnt out of whatever their current situation. Now, obviously, this applies to the profession more than just PTs. Obviously, chiropractors, ATs, and so on can also benefit from this model. Really great episode. Learned a lot from Ray. Cannot wait to continue to work with him. Highly recommend you check him out if you haven't yet. Enjoy. Ray, welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you again today. I really appreciate your time. For people who maybe missed our first episode we did together last year, maybe they haven't heard about you as much as I have over the last year from some of our amazing mutual connections there, Megan, Taylor, and so on that way. Would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the great things you do and Engage Movement and just this amazing world that you live in, man?
Yeah, man, it's good to be back here, dude. It was good to kind of reminisce on what our life was like a year ago when we first had this convo. But yeah, I'm Dr. Ray Gorman, physical therapist and owner of Engage Movement. My journey, I think, is very non-traditional through the PT world. I think it started very traditionally, but ultimately has, it's kind of leaning into this phase of like everything that's happened to me, good or bad, has kind of led me here. And a little bit about my background, I've been kind of involved in sports and fitness my whole life. Really got into fitness. I think it was like probably around 2008, started doing CrossFit and started coaching. And I knew I wanted to be in the medical realm, but I wasn't quite committed to becoming an MD. I'm actually really glad I didn't go that route. And so I kind of fell into the physical therapy space of, seeing what physical therapists did and kind of seeing that rehab to performance spectrum was really something that kind of pulled me in. And shortly after starting my fitness journey, I started working as a PT tech at a physical therapy clinic, outpatient orthopedic. Fast forward, I tear my ACL. I go through the rehab experience as a patient, as a 21-year-old, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the first seed had been planted for me to kind of start to think about this virtual model. And I'll never forget, man, I'm in the clinic. I'm actually on the total gym doing like single leg press. And I'm like wondering to myself at this end phase of rehab, like, why do I need to be here to do these exercises when like the things that I'm doing at my gym on campus are more difficult than this? And I didn't realize it at the time, but like the reason for that was because like that's the only way the clinic gets paid, right? They have to trade the time that I spend there in order to bill the units. So fast forward again, I go to physical therapy school. I graduated in 2014. School was great. I actually ended up taking a job back at the same clinic. I think I did what a lot of physical therapists do. I kind of took the safe route. And I took a job at somewhere that was familiar, where pace was a little bit slower. I knew who my mentors were going to be. I knew what the system was going to be like. And honestly, like I don't really have that many bad things to say about the traditional physical therapy model, except that like it wasn't filled with the clients that I truly wanted to work with. So I personally think traditional physical therapy realm is perfectly designed for consumers who need traditional physical therapy, but I actually think that there is just like the subset of people that don't quite fit in. And started my cash practice about a year out of school, and quickly found that I had the same problem in the traditional clinic that I did in cash based, trading time for money just on a shorter scale. So I started to add a virtual offer. I finally kind of took my idea from my ACL days. I had some experience working online, and I just kind of blended the best of both worlds, man. And now, with Engage Movement, what we actually do is we teach rehab professionals that exact model where they can get the best of both worlds, the in-person side and the virtual offer, and truly bridge that gap from rehab to performance.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I love the personal tie-in as well in relation to your own experience rehabbing your
Yeah.
ACL. And it's interesting because I've seen a fair amount of athletes who have very similar complaints that way, right? Where they come in and they say, you know what? I just don't think this is worth my time. And if it's
Yeah.
not worth their time, it's clearly not going to be worth the PT's time. So it becomes this kind of concept that way where we have to reinvent the framework, if you will. As you mentioned, the traditional PT model works, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I
Yeah.
can sit here and poke holes in it all day by some of the frustrations we all have in it. As you mentioned, trading time for money and valuing the time more than the outcome that we
Hmm.
actually get from our time. And some of these different like mill clinic style and that sort of thing.
Sure.
But a point we made about a year ago and a point that I'll bring up again is there are people that just need that. That's all they need. So, if we kill that model, we actually stop serving a vast
Yep.
majority of the PT profession and population. If you look at the majority of PTs, they probably work in a general outpatient type clinic or a general hospital setting. They're not all looking to get highly specialized or into a very small niche market, if you will. And
Yeah.
the majority of patients that we see collectively probably don't need highly specialized care. You
Yep.
probably don't need
We're
a
talking
highly
like the 1%.
yeah, you probably don't need a highly specialized PT
Yeah.
to rehab your knee replacement. I'm
Right.
sorry, but plain and simple, you can go to a lot of these different places depending on your goals and outcomes and get pretty good outcomes.
Yep.
Again, maybe you want a little bit more, you ask a little bit, maybe they'll push a little bit more. It exists, but the majority of people and the majority of PTs work well under that model. But what I've found is that model is not for everyone, as you mentioned. And I feel like, at least in my own experience, I found myself very frustrated by that model because, as you mentioned, trading time for money, it becomes this hamster wheel game where
Yep.
you can't get off the wheel because if you get off the wheel, now you're not actually making money. You don't have the ability to pay for your trips, your travel, your time off, your rent, whatever it is that's important to you. You have to keep working. And I find, at least for myself and a lot of the other PTs I've talked with, you almost feel stuck in a way. You feel like you
Yeah.
have to stay within that system, and it's very difficult to break free because the only way to get more money to break free really is to
More
give more
volume.
time. But
Yep.
there's only so many hours in the day.
There's a couple interesting threads to pull on in that in what you said. The first is kind of like what I almost call like this return to sport paradox. It's kind of this interesting thing that happens in PT in that like the closer somebody gets to their we kind of go through like this bell curve, right? Where we have this like initial time of seeing somebody where like we need to see them for high volume, and then we kind of go through this lull of time. And then as we get to the end, it's not that we need to see them in more volume, but we actually need more touch points with them. So like even when I went into my cash-based clinic, I was maybe seeing clients once a week, once every other week, once a month. But the reality was like the closer they got to return to sport, I needed to see them more, or I needed more what I call touch points with them to build volume. But it wasn't in the matter of like they needed to come in for $200 visits 3 times a week. It was how do I change the service mechanism to give them 3 touch points per week with me to get them the outcome of going back from an ACL reconstruction back to CrossFit, back to powerlifting, back to soccer, whatever it was, without, looking at a $600 a week tab. And once I solved that problem in my business by what I call a prescriptive exercise program, that really allowed me to start seeing like truly complete outcomes that got clients off that kind of peak and valley, that cycle of re-injury. And it was just like crazy to me how much better they were going back and how much complete they were going back, and ultimately like how infrequently they were coming back with flare-ups, right? Because there was actually a service medium that solved their problem that wasn't just coming into therapy.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And to your point on touch points, I think a lot of PTs already do this in a way. We talked about it back in the
they they
fall, in the winter.
they give it away for free.
Right. And it's one of those things where, to the point made, in a past podcast with Kelly Starrett and Brent Brookbush,
Yeah.
if you're a PT and you're not giving your patients something to do outside of the walls of the clinic, then
Yeah.
you're likely not going to get a whole lot of people sent to you because that is really a game changing thing as far as getting results. And people want results, people refer for results, and so on that way. However, you have to ask yourself how much do you value your own time, first off? And
Mm-hmm.
second off, what is your time worth? Because I think most clinicians will agree it's worth more than what they're getting paid by the insurance companies. However,
Yep.
they're not willing to think outside the box and come up with alternate strategies to monetize their time, their knowledge, and their skill set. If I
Yeah.
can provide something unique to a patient, specific to them, that increases their likelihood of results and increases the efficiency of their rehab model, if you will, and I can continue to provide that even after they walk out of my own clinic doors, outside of my brick and mortar clinic doors, then I feel like, at least personally, I deserve something a little extra for that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's knowing that what you're doing has results and has a positive effect. I don't think you can just charge someone an arm and a leg for a home program that's,
Sure.
cookie cutter, three
Sure.
sets of 10, everything. You had Chat GPT put it together for you,
Sure.
actually. And I think that that's the piece that really differentiates this, in my mind, anyways, is it's not just you providing the service, it's the service exceeding expectations for the price.
Yeah, 100%, man. This, it's not saying like, hey, you're just going to now sell what would be an HEP. It's saying that we need to draw a line in the sand between what is a home exercise program and what is a prescriptive exercise program. What is something that the value of it is free, that there's no management of it for me outside of our time together, and what is something that is actually progressive, what is something that actually gives you access to me, what is actually something that allows you to become autonomous outside of the clinic walls, and what is something that helps you learn and get your outcome on your own. That's really the crux of the PEP there. And what I think a lot of people who are trying to do this, what I think a lot of them are doing is they're doing it in ways where it actually costs them money. They're doing it in ways where they are attaching multiple sessions to this recurring revenue feature. They are giving it away with sessions. And ultimately, the only thing that they're doing is really adding more documentation time to their schedule because there's no disassociation between the in-person session and the virtual offer, right? So when we structure this in our businesses and the coaches and the PTs that we work with, we kind of call this a layered revenue system. And basically, what the layered revenue system is it's made up of your fee for service revenue, whether that's session by session or packages, and then you're stacking MRR, monthly recurring revenue, alongside that. So really, it's giving you the best of both worlds because when I started practicing as a cash-based physical therapist, I quickly realized that the biggest stressor I had was every single month was starting over at zero. And every single time I took a vacation, it cost me twice as much. It cost me the cost of the vacation and the lost revenue for the sessions that I wasn't going to service in those times. And so what I kind of found was I found myself not taking vacations. I found myself only taking a Friday off to take a vacation. And honestly, man, like just to put it plain and simple, like I felt like I was a prisoner of the profession. Like I felt like I couldn't take time off if I wanted to take time off. And so for me, one of the things that I've really realized as I've grown as a person, as an entrepreneur, is this concept of freedom and flexibility is really the thing that is the most important to me in my life. You know, whether you want to admit it or not, like the moment you are tied to a schedule to generate revenue, you are a prisoner of your schedule.
I think it's pretty common to hear PTs say, yeah, man, it's been a year since I took a vacation, or it's been 18
Hmm.
months, it's been 2 years. And that's just not necessarily the life that we have to live. And I
Yeah.
remember even when we had just kind of started our clinic and we were building and scaling things up. And keep in mind, I'm the only PT here at this point. We have one other PT in the company. So a lot of times people are like, oh, well, someone else can cover for me. Well, not in this case. If you're just starting off, it might only be you. You might not have a full guy in
Yeah.
this case. And if you're not there, there's no revenue coming in. Everything stops. It slows
When,
down. So maybe you could take a little bit longer, but at least for myself, I always felt guilty if I did, because then again, the
mm,
business, the company's not growing, but also how can I provide for my patients if I'm not physically there? Again,
yeah,
to your point, we were so dependent on being physically with our patients. We were so dependent on seeing our patients 2 to 3 times a week in clinic.
yeah,
We didn't even think about the possibility of what could I do remotely? How could I provide for this person when I'm, 2,000 miles away? And I think to your point, a lot of times patients would actually prefer that. I've had patients drive over an hour for PT.
yep.
If they could get the same exercise prescription at home, save themselves the drive, save themselves the time, and, depending on the case, possibly even save themselves the money. I think a lot of times people think a cash-based model or a hybrid model like this is going to be more expensive, but I'll be honest with you,
Mm,
man, some of the co-pays, deductibles I've been seeing lately, it might even be cheaper for some people to go with something like this as opposed to, getting slammed with a $120 initial eval bill for your deductible, 6 weeks after you had it, even though you thought you were good, and then you get a
yeah.
little surprised that way. So I certainly think this is something that solves the issue, not just for the provider, but even the patient themselves.
Well, so I always like to ask PTs this question, right? If you went to PT school and the standard model was the way that you get clients better is with asynchronous care, would we be as opposed to it as we are now?
Absolutely not.
No, right? Because that is just what we are taught. So therefore, that is what we are comfortable with. I used to believe that there was nothing better than being in person with clients. And that is true for some aspects of the journey. But then I had a period of my career where everything I did was online. And I was getting clients who had gone to traditional physical therapy, cash based physical therapists, had gone to surgeons, and hadn't gotten the outcomes that they wanted because nobody was actually helping them manage the number one thing, which was their programming, which was how their body responds to programming, how ultimately how their body responds to stress. And so once I understood that concept, it was like, dude, like best of both worlds. Let's stack these things on top of people and let's create the perfect version of an offer for somebody that blends the right amount of in person and the right amount of virtual, but also gives providers the opportunity to say, like, I can get you an outcome with never seeing you, right? And like that's not going to be a good model for everyone, but it is going to be a good model for the right people. And one of the biggest things that I think we're scared of when we go into this realm of being our own business is so many PTs want to remain generalists and go into the cash-based space. Like that is like the worst thing that you could do. I actually want my marketing to exclude 99% of the people who talk to who hear about me, right? There will be people that listen to this. It's probably less than 99% because of what I know your audience to be, but there will be people that listen to this and say, "Not for me. Ray's not my guy." Good. Like that makes it so much easier for me to talk to people that are my ideal client, that are the type of people that want this model.
I completely agree with that. It's like at the end of the day, you can't be the person for everyone,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It's great if we could, but that's just not the reality of the situation. And I would say, on top of that, to your point that you made in relation to, the home program and just being able to, again, have that flexibility of schedule, if you will, and just overall, how PTs and patients are just looking for something different a lot of the times that way. I think now more than ever, people are getting more educated. They know
Yeah.
more and they want more control and autonomy in their situation. And I see that all the time in the sense that, there's patients that go to clinics where they're not even seen by their PT the majority of the
Right.
time. They're seen
Right.
by a PTA, they're seen by a
Right.
tech, and they're okay with that and they get results. So,
Yep.
to your point that you made on top of that in relation to asynchronous care being kind of the new standard, if you will, if you're okay being a PT who doesn't even lead your patient through exercises in the clinic and just sitting back and watching it happen, or armchair quarterbacking it, for lack of
Yeah.
a better way to put it, why are you not okay doing that behind a screen? Right? It's
Yeah.
it's almost no different in a way.
It's funny that you say that. I kind of tell people because they're like, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I even write a program? I'm like, how do you write a program in the clinic?
Hmm.
Like, it's like, I promise you, it's no different. It's just like the only different. I just did a presentation on this for my group that I coached yesterday. And I said, look, the only difference is the difference in feedback lag time. So when we're in person, we have real-time feedback. So if I have clients that have high severity, high irritability, low training IQ, I need to bias those clients towards an in-person experience because I need to give them real-time feedback. I need to decision make time. But if I have somebody that's low irritability, low severity, more chronic in nature, they're just going through their life with this pain experience, they have a high training IQ, but they're kind of pushing through things. I don't need to give that person real time feedback. I need to give that person asynchronous feedback. I need to give them delayed feedback, right? I need to allow them to discover and play around with the variables. Like we're leaning into this age of PT where people are saying, well, exercise is the most important thing, but really it's like exercise with me is the most important thing. And why can't we say, like, if exercise is the most important thing, we can shift the model to get clients outcomes where both they get their time back, we get our time back, and we completely change the vibe around the profession.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a great point because to your point on the vibe of the profession, I think everyone has a story of someone who's had a bad experience with PT. Maybe it's a patient you worked with, a
Sure.
family member, whoever. And it's like, that's just not the vibe I want for the
Yeah.
profession. That's also not what I want people to be saying about our profession. I want us to adapt to the needs of the people, and I want us as a profession to be able to keep up and adapt with the times. I think not only are we as clinicians busier than ever, but I think a lot of the people we serve are busier than ever. I don't
Yeah.
care if you're talking athletes or overall adults, people travel, people go places, people work, and schedules tend to get more demanding, not
Yep.
less. So if you can't find a way to optimize your own workflow so that you can provide for those people, you miss out on it entirely. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a patient who, we unfortunately cannot see any longer because we don't have a time in the day that they can actually come in the schedule. And I've
Sure.
had this happen before even. There was someone who moved from the city, New York City,
Hmm.
and I learned firsthand that New York City is the city that never sleeps because they actually have PT clinics there that are open until 10,
Yeah.
11, sometimes even later at night.
Yeah.
So when they called our office and said they want a 9:30 p.m. appointment, I was like, I've got nothing for you, dude. I can't I
Excuse me.
can't keep someone here that late at night. But there's an opportunity missed, right? Because
Yeah.
that person is going to find a place to go that fits their schedule for PT. And unfortunately, I just couldn't provide for them because I didn't have the actual physical time in my schedule to do that. But if I had some kind of virtual offering, again, maybe I stay late one day, just one
Yep.
day, get that in-person eval done, and then transition to a program from there, right? Now we've got a system that works, serves that person, but also works around my schedule, as opposed to a missed opportunity to help someone who actually needs it.
This is literally a strategy that we teach, and I actually used to do this exact same thing. So I used to live in Reno, Nevada, a town called Fallon that's about 45 minutes away. It's more rural-y, but like probably not the best healthcare out there. There's not a lot of providers out there. And it's very common for people from Fallon to make the 45, 50-minute drive into Reno to do their major errands, right? And so I had a CrossFit gym out there that used to refer a ton of clients to me, and I would do exactly that. They would come into my clinic, I would evaluate them. I would say, hey, look, you actually don't need to drive into town every week to see me. I'm going to put you on a prescriptive exercise program, and you're going to do it at the gym that you go to. Perfect. Second example, I used to coach at a CrossFit gym down in Vegas. So now we're talking 500-mile gap, right? But within the same state. When I would go home, I'd actually coordinate with the gym owner and say, hey, I'd like to come in and do a day of evals. I would literally go, I would do 7 to 8 evals, and I would put those clients onto a prescriptive exercise program with me, and I would generate $1,800 in recurring revenue per month. And I would create sustainable, recurring revenue within my business. Ultimately, required me to see less clients in person and live the life that I wanted to live.
Now, you mentioned that you were doing a lot of these evals in person. I'm curious, did you ever do evals virtually or remotely or
Yeah.
over something like a Zoom call? And if so, what do you feel like the biggest difference or learning curve was from being there in person, seeing these things, feeling these things firsthand, as opposed to, maybe being limited by your
Yep.
ability to actually be physically with someone?
Yeah. Good question. So for a big period of my life, not big period of my life, big period of my career, I guess. I actually had a phase where there was a pipeline of revenue where everything I was doing was on. And what I didn't do, I think what a lot of physical therapists do when they go online is they start to do telehealth or they start to do synchronous virtual visits. And if in person drove me crazy, like virtual synchronous have literally had me running my wall. So I do not recommend that model. We do have some people that use it because that's just what they're comfortable with. But when I did everything online, it was actually a virtual asynchronous assessment. So essentially, how the process worked is you and I would sync up for 30 minutes. I'd get all the subjective information I needed. I'd say, okay, Dan, based on what you told me, I'm going to send you a series of range of motion screens, movement screens, strength screens. Once that data is in, I will then send you a summary of findings. From that summary of findings, I will program your first week and we will see how you tolerate the first week, and then I'll make adjustments from there. So that was a big period of life, and really kind of the thing that I ended up systemizing to teach to other coaches, to teach to other rehab professionals, that has now kind of become this crux of what we teach today, is really built around that type of systemization right there, and just blending what they already know with the in-person side.
And I feel like now more than ever, that space or that asynchronous eval, if you will, it's getting easier than ever through the power of technology. I mean, we
Yeah,
have the ability to assess so much through a camera, right? I can use a certain app and get kinograms of someone's
sure.
movement pattern, how they run, how they sprint. I can use
Yeah,
a free app and get an estimate of their jump height, their RSI, all these other performance-oriented type variables without really any fancy, elaborate, expensive tech and without even seeing the person in person. So
yeah,
now more than ever, with this explosion of technology that we're seeing, it's becoming easier and easier to get objective data points. And I think
yeah.
that's the other piece to this puzzle that, at least for myself, I found a little scary at first in relation to this online world, is I think PTs in general are so conditioned that there has to be something objective that you can measure,
Yeah.
your goniometer measurement, your manual muscle test, whatever it is that way. You have to have something objective. You can't just rely on the subjective.
I'll
Oddly enough, about 90 to 95% of my in-person evals right now are subjective.
Yeah,
And
yep.
I think that the less we rely on those objective things, oddly enough, the more accurate my diagnoses have been. You don't get lost in this world of special tests and which ones are
Yeah.
reliable and which ones aren't, and clusters that are, proven versus not. Not to say they're all bad, but I'm just saying that there's so much value in the subjective. And if you want the objective, you now have the ability to get those things remotely in ways that didn't exist 5 to 10 years ago.
Well, when you really think about it, were we taking objective measures for the client, or were we taking objective measures to justify payment from the insurance company, right?
Right.
I'll tell you a funny story. So one of the common themes that we hear from people is when they're thinking about going cash based, thinking about going online, they tell themselves this story that like, well, my existing clientele won't want this offer, so therefore I shouldn't do it. And like the big lesson there is your existing clientele insurance-based clinic is not going to be the existing clientele that you see in the insurance clinic. And the biggest mistake that I made, I will never forget this to this day. When I did my first cash evaluation, it was this lady named Stephanie. She was awesome, great athlete. Thank you for trusting me, in that first experience. And my thought process was like, okay, so how do I make this cash-based eval so much more valuable than an insurance-based eval, right? And I had goniometers, and dude, I kid you not, like I took range of motion measurements of every joint in the body because I thought that is what would make the experience valuable. I thought that this like volume approach would be great. And so one of the biggest problems that people have when they make the transition from the insurance model into the capital, they don't actually have a framework or a system or a lens to process things through that is different from the insurance realm. So, one of the reasons why we have so much success with our providers actually going online is because we teach them what the assessment principles should look like. We teach them what the data collection process should look like in a way that's very intentional of like you're collecting this data so that when you make the program, very easy, it's very simple, it's very streamlined. Too often, providers are spending an hour per week on programs. And if you are charging $200 a month, you're less than $50 an hour, right? So what we try to do is we try to get our clients to be like 45 minutes per month on the program. And now what we can do is we take their effective hourly rate, let's say they're charging $300 per hour, we their effective hourly rate to $400 an hour. Like for some reason, everybody else is structuring it where the effective hourly rate is going down. We want to ensure that effective hourly rate is always going up.
Yeah, 100%. As you become more skilled at something, you should get paid more for your work. You become more
Yes.
effective, more efficient. That's how a lot of other professions work,
And
If
and I think there's a guilt component to it, right? Like I really believe that like physical therapists think that if it took me 5 minutes, it shouldn't cost the same as if it took me an hour. Because again, you are conditioned, we are conditioned, I was conditioned to believing that time was the metric that made us valuable, not outcome. That is the biggest shift that people have to make.
you're right, it's all about how you define value. And to add another example to that, if something breaks down, like last summer, my air conditioning broke down in my apartment. I was really upset. I wanted it fixed quickly.
Yeah.
So, do I care if it took the AC repair guy 8 hours or 1 hour to fix my
Right.
AC? Or do I care that it's fixed and working again?
Yeah.
I care that it's fixed and working again and it didn't break a second time, knock on wood. I don't care how long it takes them. And again, the more skilled you are at it, the quicker you can diagnose and the better your intervention is going to be. So naturally, the more skilled you become, the more your effective hourly rate. should be. And I agree on that point of refining value, but also understanding that value looks a little bit different to different people. Going back to your point on knowing
Hmm.
who your target audience is going to be, there are people out there that do actually want you to take the goniometer and they want to measure every joint to the
Hmm.
point that you made. They want that. They want that feedback. They want those numbers. They want to see it all graphed out, charted up in a nice, pretty format that they can understand. To some people, that's valuable, and they'll pay even extra on top of what you're already charging in order to get that. There's other people out there that, like I mentioned, they want the result and they want it efficiently. And then there's other people that find value in other things. There's people that I've seen go to physical therapists simply because they're nice people. The
Hmm.
outcome was
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
extremely poor, but they had a really positive experience
yeah.
and they had really good interactions with their PT and they developed a really good relation. So in that case, I'm not saying this is right. I'm not saying it's wrong either. But for some people, the outcome didn't even matter. They just wanted a good relation and they wanted someone to actually just hear about what they're going through, hear about their pain experience and this journey that they've been on in and out of clinics and so on that way. And all it took was one person actually listening to that to get a client for life. So
Yeah.
understanding that the more you realize value looks different to each person, the more effective you're going to be in actually kind of customizing and tailoring your interventions. I can give the same exercise to 5 different people, but it's doing maybe 5 different things or providing value in 5 different ways. So always understanding that, the way we customize and intervene is not just using a whole new exercise approach or a whole new set and rep scheme to every patient, but sometimes just the methodology in which we deliver it and the language we package it up with. Quick break because if you're a rehab professional sick of burnout, this could be your answer. Engage Movement's blended practice model is a proven system built by Dr. Ray Gorman, a PT who walked away from the 55-hour-a-week grind and built a blended practice model that doubled his income while working less than 25 hours a week, and he didn't have to rely on the traditional way of selling sessions to do so. It's all about blending remote and in-person services, stacking monthly recurring revenue, and building a business that finally supports your life, not the other way around. This model isn't just theory. Real providers, including myself, are creating lives of freedom and flexibility without being tied to their schedule. And as a listener, you get free access to the complete training. DM my name, Dan, to @Ray Gorman DPT on Instagram and receive your free breakdown on the model.
Even more important for longevity of staying in this profession. And some people may think that this is a selfish take. You have to figure out what you value the most. Because if somebody comes in and starts telling me what they want the experience to be, I have a choice. I either bend my boundaries and give that experience to take their money, or I say, you know what, if you want that experience, you're probably actually not a great client for me. Here's somebody that would be better served to suit you. And so I really think this concept of burnout just comes from doing things for the wrong reasons. And we don't understand the energetic toll that those things take on us, right? And so like for me it was, I always think back to like early in my career, like the first thing I did was try to make more money as a PT, and I worked at a nursing home. I remember like every day being in there being like, man, like this is just like not where I want to be. Like this is just not where I want to be. I'm making more money. I was making like almost $20 more per hour in there, but like the setting, I hated it. And I finally had this day where unfortunately, life comes full circle for us, but a resident passed away, and not like with us in therapy or anything, just passed away. And one of the nurses comes into the PT room and is like, "Hey, I need a couple guys. We have to move a body." And it was like in that moment where I was like, "I'm never doing this again." Like this isn't what I went to PT school for. And the problem that I had after that was nothing that I had saw out there in the PT realm actually fit what I was trying to do. And so I've kind of learned that like if it doesn't exist, you have to create it. And that has really become a valuable lesson for me in building my business is like people will say that like there's the way to scale your business is taking all your profit and reinvesting it back and just scaling and growth. Like I'll tell you what, that does not sound like the way I want to build my business. And so part of it for me is like, how do I prove people wrong that you can build a business and scale it as big as you want, as lean as you want, and you are going to have to leave some money on the table. You are going to have to leave some time on the table. But like at the end of the day, like I think the real message here is like if you want certain things in life, you are potentially going to have to go the uncommon route.
Understand the direction you're going with that, right? To the point you made earlier, you knew you wanted more freedom of schedule. You wanted to be able to pick up, pack up, and travel 3, 4 days a week, sometimes even 5 days a week, and not
Yep.
feel guilty about it, not feel stressed and concerned about the revenue that your business would be generating, what you would be taking home, and so on. That way, you wanted the ability to pick up, go wherever, but still have a stable source of income, a stable
Hmm.
business, a stable job, whatever term you want to throw at it. And I think that's just as important is just knowing the direction that you're heading with things, knowing exactly what you want and why you want it. Because to the point that you made, I've seen a lot of PTs in that space where they're trading time for more money, putting themselves in situations that they don't like. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, this life is far too short for any of us to be spending a lot of time
Yep.
on things that don't fulfill us, that don't make us happy, that don't bring us joy. At least for myself, I just don't have time or room for that in my schedule anymore. It's not worth it for me. I don't
Yep.
want to spend the time on that. I don't wish that upon anyone else. So it's a matter of how do I adjust my schedule to do the things that do fulfill me, that allow me to have an impact on others, that lift them up. But to the point you made on time again, understanding that I also need a little bit of time in my own day in order to do those things. I need to hit my own workout. I can't be working 12 hours every day because then I'm exhausted.
Yep.
I'm not the best version of me. And if I want to be the most effective at providing for the people that I serve, I need to be the best version of me. And if I can't be the best version of me because of my schedule, because of my workflow, because I'm working 12-hour days, and I've been there before, it's a grind. And at the
Yep.
time, I thought it was almost like this trophy, to
This is
where
what you do. Yes.
exhaustion as a badge of honor, if you will.
Yes.
And I think, when you're young, and again, I was younger at the time, I think that's kind of like promoted as a good thing.
Yep.
And I've been there. It didn't last very long. I
Yeah.
learned very quickly that it's not just about putting in a lot of work or hard work. It's about being smart about it, being calculated about it, and having the direction that you're going mapped out ahead of time. I'm going to be driving to Knoxville, Tennessee next week. There's two different routes that Google Maps proposed to me, and one takes 9 hours, one takes 13 hours.
Hmm.
Either one will get me to my destination, but one gets me there a lot more efficiently
Yeah.
than the other. So understanding that in life and in this kind of PT career space, if you will, you're always going to have multiple paths that will probably get you to a decent destination, or maybe it's the same destination, but understanding one is probably going to get you there a lot quicker and leave you a lot more time to do things that you want to do instead of just still be in that kind of travel mode, if you will.
You said something that really resonated with me. My hustle and grind time, right? My go-getter work your face to the bone mentality almost cost me my relationship with my wife. We basically were living together. We weren't married at the time. But there was a period of time where I would literally lock myself in my office from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would come out. I would go right to my phone, back to work mode, right? Like seeing what was going on social media, not realizing that like I was actually using work to hide. I was using work to escape from my feelings. I was using work to avoid hard conversations. And I truly believe that like we are not put on this earth to just like be in a box 8, 10, 12 hours per day. Like there are ways to structure your life and your schedule. And for me, building a business around my life rather than building my life around my business is something that's really important to me because I've seen what it's like to almost have that taken away because of my actions and because of my insecurities and because of my inability to um, communicate like what was actually going on in my life. And so I feel like a lot of people are working so hard and like you said that pseudo badge of honor, but like when you peel back the layers, there's probably something deeper that they're hiding from. There's probably some wound there that has not yet been healed. And it's really easy to fall back into a different addiction rather than drugs and alcohol, but that workaholicism, is a real journey, man.
It really is. And it's one of those things, to your point again, I think we're getting a little deep and philosophical at this point, but
Yeah,
you
we
have
took
to
we
ask
we we
yourself,
went like super tactical into super deep, but I like it.
you have to ask yourself, do you work to live or do you live to work at the end of
Yeah.
the day?
Yeah.
And, one of the other things I've found is even just last summer living near the beach, like I would go to the beach, but you never escape work and you're on your phone, you're answering texts and messages and emails and calling people back and stuff. So you have this pseudo freedom. You feel like you can do anything you want, but you don't actually have full control of your time, or at least I didn't. And that's something that, at least for me, I knew I wanted to change. I wanted to be able to actually disconnect from things, throw on do not disturb on my phone and not feel guilty
Yeah.
about it, if you
Well,
will. And I think that that's something that a lot of people face nowadays as well. And I'll say this even extends beyond the PT profession. Strength coaches, athletic
mhm.
trainers, there's so many other professions out there that I talk with people and they just feel stuck again by the same thing we've talked about. They're trading
Yeah.
time for money. The system just isn't providing for them. They feel like their workload increases, yet they're not getting any more for the work, the volume of work that they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't have the ability to escape it. They don't have the ability to just pack up and be free and go wherever they want, whenever they want. They're just on that hamster wheel, spinning it away over and over and over again. And the more we kind of promote this model of flexibility, not just for the provider, but for the patient and client as well, the more I think we can see that this extends beyond just the scope of PT. This extends to AT, chiropractic,
Yeah.
S&C, and so on that way is I think that, there's a lot of other professions out there that can really, really benefit from this understanding of, hey, the way we've always done things might not have been the best way, and it's time for us to evolve a little bit. There's a time where the sport of baseball was played without a glove. We
Well,
now realize baseball should be played with a
yeah,
glove
yeah,
on the
yeah.
hand, right? Why have we not yet realized that, hey, maybe the way we've always done things is not the best for everyone? It's great for some people, but maybe not the best for you. There's a new way, there's an alternate way, there's an evolved method. And if you follow it, it'll bring success to you, the people you work with on all fronts.
I don't know why we've had such a hard time putting boundaries around our time, right? And I don't know why we have decided that we need to be the martyrs of the healthcare profession. Um, it was really funny, man. Like I saw this clip on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, and the Masters is coming up for golf, and there was a clip of I think it was Ian Poulter where he's on the putting green. He marks his putt and he like swipes at his ball and his ball goes in the water. And in order to not take a penalty stroke, like he actually had to get his ball out of the water. And do you know who was the person on his team that got it out of the water for him?
It's,
It was his
it's
physical therapist.
not his
And like
caddy, not.
I don't know why that metaphor just like stood out so much to me where I'm like we are just that people that will like kind of eat crap so everybody else is good. And I want to empower those of you out there that are listening that like you can both be a good person and take care of yourself. you can both be a good person and want to make a lot of money. You can both be a good person and not be greedy when you ask for more. And so like you don't have to accept the things that you're tolerating, but you do have to accept that you won't tolerate them any longer, right? And so like we're getting put in a really tough position as physical therapists because reimbursement rates are going down, volume requirements are going to go up, and your wage is not going to keep up. And guess what? Your job will easily be taken by a new grad next year, especially if you're in the outpatient orthopedic realm, because like they will come out not knowing what they can tolerate yet. And so they will just accept that. And so you kind of get stuck in this like, well, do I leave the profession? Do I go into home health? Or do I actually like take control of my financial earning potential? Do I give myself the possibility for freedom and flexibility? Do I learn the skills of marketing and sales so I can control the entire ecosystem? And I'll tell you what, man, like we have providers out there. I have a guy that just texted me this morning. He's a solo provider. He did 20K last month. 2 days into the month, he's already at 14K.
Two
His
days.
2 days into the month, his overhead will probably be like $2,000 to $3,000. That is insane money when you talk about like what the profession is generally making in patient care, right? In direct patient care. That is unheard of. It's different if you're going to build a business, scale it with a bunch of people, bunch of locations. Not really what I recommend, not really what I do. But like there are really high margin, really high profit, really low overhead models out there, and that's really what we do as a company.
And on top of that, I would imagine you don't need to have 200,000 followers or anything ridiculous on social media in order to
No.
make that happen. Like, obviously, that's a bit of a cheat code that I'm sure everyone would like to unlock, but you don't need that in order to finish this game.
You honestly, one of my clients, she actually coaches for us now. She hit a 17.5 month and she never posts on Instagram. Like the biggest thing that people need to understand is that like adding virtual services to your business does not mean you need to go all in on social media. Being on social media will make your life easier, will make your messaging easier, will make attracting clients easier. If you ever want to go fully online, will make that transition easier. But like we have plenty of providers that don't want to be online but want an online component to their business, and we can just do that with the performance provider growth model and with the prescriptive exercise program because it's still being built off of a local business. We can help people build fully virtual businesses. One of the things that I've learned is like the concepts are all kind of the same. It's just like a lot of people want the outcome of the virtual business, but don't actually want to do the work that's required to get the virtual business. So like you just have to kind of be real with the expectations that you're looking to set on yourself and figure out like what it is you're willing to do. It'll be a way faster ramp up to meaningful revenue if you have an in-person component. No doubt. No doubt.
I 100% agree. And it's one of those things, it's like, the combination of all the things to start. And then from there, you can kind of take it wherever you want to go. Because in this case, you're in charge and you
Yeah.
have the bull by the horns. And I think you mentioned about, potentially switching careers. And I've met and talked with some great PTs that are at that point right now where they're saying,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is for me anymore. I think I'm going to go to this profession or that profession. And the thing is, the grass might look greener, but you're still going to fall into the same trap. You're
Yep.
still in
Exactly.
no control over your own schedule. You don't have control over your own time. And ultimately, you're spending your days trading your time for money. Now, it might be a little more money, but is that our main goal here? Is our whole goal just to put more money in our pocket? Or again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is it to restructure and reframe the way we do everything? So now we don't just have the money coming in, but we also have the time to maybe travel, enjoy our life a little bit, and live a little bit and not feel guilty about it. Because
Yeah.
again, these are just simple, basic things that I think everyone needs in life. You
The
need to have a little time off, you need to have a chance to reset. And again, you need to have the ability to kind of take care of yourself so that you're not pouring from an empty cup all of the time. And I think it also takes people, providers, patients, whoever, they just need a little taste of this. And
Yeah.
once you get it, you almost become more addicted to that feeling of freedom than that feeling of workaholicism that you mentioned earlier. At least I personally felt that way. Once I started to travel more and see what was possible, I realized that I liked it and I wanted more of it.
Yeah.
I didn't like being stuck. I didn't like feeling like I'm in this one physical location, going the same route, same daily routine every single day, day in and day out. I like this concept of variability and
Yeah.
unpredictability in my schedule and having the ability to pick up and drive someplace and catch up with people I haven't seen in a while, stay a couple days, still be able to provide for people that I'm working with, but have the ability to do that from wherever I am and not just being stuck in the same daily routine day in and day out.
Well, for most of us, it's just a balance of like what's familiar and what's unfamiliar, right? Like we are very unfamiliar with peace in our life, calmness in our life, downtime in our life. And so one of the hardest things for people when they get that, because we have providers that work 4 to 5 hours per day, 3 to 4 days per week. When they get that in their life, it's hard for them to actually enjoy it in the beginning because it's unfamiliar. And so what do? They add chaos, they add complexity, right? And so you have to realize that like you can't just take that time and do nothing with it. You have to take that time and fill it with things that you enjoy. So like for me, that was like getting back into a fitness routine. That was getting back into a hobby like golf. That was going on longer walks throughout the day. That was being outside more, being out of my office more. But the trap that I can find myself being pulled back into is being addicted to that feeling of stress, being addicted to that feeling of chaos, being addicted to that cortisol response, right? And so I have to catch myself that's like, hey, like, do you actually have a problem or are you trying to create one for yourself? And it's a really hard journey. It's easier said than done, but that's kind of been the thing that we're really trying to gift to people is teaching them that practice of feeling that calmness, feeling that stillness, and trusting that they're on the right path that's meant for them.
It's so funny you say that because I feel like in PT school, I always thought that, the smartest people were the ones who had these just elaborate, complex ideas and systems and just super complex topics. And, it was just a language that I didn't understand to hear them explain it. And then I realized that my definition of an expert changed, and it's not just someone who can use that kind of technical jargon, but actually just take it and simplify it to a level that anyone can understand. I
But
think that
also,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say on that point, also like the smarter we are and the more technical and analytical we are, the harder it gets for us to take risk.
We always have that conversation around risk and reward. And I think we forget in order for high reward, we have to be comfortable with a level of risk. And I think the traditional phrase was high risk, high reward, but I don't think that's the case. In fact, knock on wood, I've yet to lose when I've bet on myself. If
Yeah.
anything, it actually makes my life a little bit more simple and streamlined. The
Well,
last 3 to 4 weeks, the entire month of March, I guess I'll say, they say March comes in like a lion, and they weren't kidding. It was a very chaotic month for me. I had a lot of different stimuli coming in, and to the point that you made, like, to be that kind of expert in my mind, my thought was maybe I'll just add more to it and that'll help. And, I found adding more is not always the best thing. Sometimes we have to actually experience addition by subtraction. And once I did that, once I realized that I can kind of focus things a little bit more, the path forward not only became more clear, but a lot of those perceived risks that
mm,
weren't actually even in the picture, just my mind kind of put them up as mental roadblocks, if you will, they actually disappeared. So now it's high reward, low to moderate risk, because again, I'm betting on myself, but I have a more clear path ahead. There's a lot less bumps in the road than there was when I'm kind of looking at, again, those 20 different routes to get to the same destination.
what does the normal person do when the stock market tanks?
They sell.
They sell, right? What do all the big investment firms do?
They buy.
They
It's like the
buy.
stock market is having a sale. Look, you can get the same stock you did yesterday, 50% off.
But there's a psychological piece to that, right? It's that what we are seeing as risk, they are seeing as opportunity. And so one of the things that I often say to people where they're like, "Well, what do you feel like is preventing you from leaving the clinic so that you can start something on your own?" They'll say, "Well, it seems very risky." And for me, I'm like, "Could I provide another perspective for you? Like, what if what you see as risky, I actually see as opportunity, and what you see as safe, I actually see as the risk. I see the risk in the known path. I see the risk being the physical therapist this was literally my journey, making $65,000 a year as a new grad, being offered $70,000 as a clinic director, and probably capping out around 100K. I see a ton of risk in that. They say, well, like, what about, losing that paycheck? Guess who can never lose their paycheck? Me. Why? Because I am literally generating my own money. So the thing that you feel like is safe could be taken from you at any point. Like, that's not to put fear in you, but that is to say that, like, the way that you are conditioned to believe about safety is not actually true. When people work with us, they learn the skill of how to make money. There is an infinite ROI on that. There is not an infinite ROI in the employment realm.
100%. And I guess one thing I want to ask before we kind of start to wrap up and conclude is I've met and talked with a lot of PTs that to that point we've just made on risk reward. And I feel very similar to you on this at this point. However, I know there's a lot of people out there that look at their salary because maybe they're at the top of the food chain at their current
Mm-hmm.
place. They're that clinic director. They're the regional director. They're the,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, exec of the company, if you will. They work in that PT space, but they're pulling 100K or they're pulling
Mm-hmm.
110K a year, or sometimes even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at what it takes to leave that and start their own from nothing,
Yeah.
as opposed to knowing that they have enough coming in right now. And, they might get a 3% raise next year, which sounds great in theory. I think that there's this obstacle that exists for many about that concept of starting from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like while it's comfortable to have something coming in that coming in. And maybe I'm soft for this, but I personally like knowing that I have something coming in before I make that jump or leap because there's always that what if it doesn't work out and so on
Yeah.
that way. But at the same time, you have to take the jump or the leap. And that's why I used that wording. You can't just go half in, half out on this, or at least I don't think you
Well, you
can.
you can, and what happens is you remove a lot of the urgency, right? And so really like the thing that you're talking about is actually the concept of courage. It's if you want the life that you really want to build, you're going to have to leave some things on the table. And the hard part is, I had a period of my career where I was making a lot of money, but I was extremely out of alignment with the company that I was working with at the time. And um, when I look back on that experience, honestly, I didn't have the courage to leave because I allowed myself to stay comfortable. And staying comfortable was actually the thing that caused me the most internal turmoil that I've ever experienced in my life. And so when I was kind of forced into making a decision to work for myself, I said, you know what? I've always done this the safe way. I've always done this with some sort of steady income coming in. I've always done this with some sort of safety net, and I'm not going to do that this time. And it's the only time I've ever actually built a business that was, you know, my full financial revenue and everything about it. So there's kind of a lesson in that, right? Is sure you can keep balancing that safety and that comfort zone, but you're not going to get the growth experience as going all in. And I get that that's not easy, and I get that that's not the fit for everybody, but we always make sure that we help clients find that balance of stretch but not stress.
I love that. I love that so much, Ray. And I realize this is something that we could probably talk about all day long. And obviously, there's a lot that goes into this concept of, hybrid virtual and in-person offerings and taking control and taking charge of your life as a clinician and so on that way. And I know that, as you mentioned, you're a wealth of knowledge and you have so many great resources in relation to this stuff. And I'm personally super excited to dig into that more myself and kind of
Yeah,
kick
man.
off this series of work that you and I are going to be doing together over the next several months. But for people who are interested, they want to learn more and they want to just get connected with you and your team that way, where can they find you at?
Yeah, best place to connect is on Instagram. You can find me over there at Ray Gorman DPT. You can also search me on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel if you want to kind of binge a little bit of content. And then if you're more of like looking to just kind of read about what we do, you can head over to engagemovement.com.
That's awesome. We'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there, right? Anything we missed as we were chatting today, man?
Man, we went pretty deep there. So I think the people out there are going to enjoy the breadth that we covered of the tactical stuff and kind of a little bit of the between the ears stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree, man. This is a great conversation. I always appreciate your time and look forward to chatting with you. Thank you again for everything you're doing, Ray.
Dan, thanks for having me, man.